Most people are focused on the savings part of their retirement planning. They contribute to their 401k, put something into a Roth IRA, and have an emergency fund. But what they often don't think about is the transition from saving to spending that will happen when they actually retire. That's why in this episode of the podcast, I talk with Laura Rehbein of Impavid Wealth Advisors on how to go about creating a new paycheck when the old one goes away. One of the biggest risks to your financial future wasn't the market, but uncertainty. Today's guest, Laura Rehbein, is the founder of Impavid Wealth Advisors, a franchise of Ameriprise Financial. With 30 years of experience, Laura helps professionals and retirees turn financial confusion into clarity. She's also the author of Fearless Finance, a practical guide to retiring with confidence. If you've ever asked, do I have enough? This conversation will give you the tools and reassurance you didn't know you needed. So welcome to the show, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
So I know that as people get within a couple of years of their retirement date, they kind of go through a mindset shift. One of my other guests once called it, he was giving them permission to spend. You have you spent 40 years saving and saying, I've got to have enough. I got to have enough. And then you start asking yourself, do I have enough? And am I allowed to spend it now? Now that I'm retired, can I spend it? And that's a huge mindset shift. So going from saving for retirement to spending in retirement, what tips do you have for folks to successfully change that way of thinking?
It is such a huge shift from prior to retirement and into retirement in a number of ways. I just spoke to a client recently who retired this month, and he was confessing to me, he's like, I didn't think it would be this emotional. It's such an overwhelming emotional shift for him. And it is, because you were in the work life, 30 years, 40 years, whatever, and you're used to that. And then to wake up one day and you don't go to work, it's a shift financially, but it's a shift emotionally. It's a shift to routine. It's a shift of everything. And the person you had on your show that says, I give you permission to spend, is right. But I say there's a caveat. It's your time to spend. However, you need to know how much you can spend, because the last thing we want somebody to do is run out of money before they run out of themselves, right?
Right.
And so you have to know if you have enough. And that is one of the most common things that people say to me. And it doesn't matter if they've got $1 million accumulated or $10 million accumulated. They always question, is it enough? Mm-hmm. And if you look back and think about younger people, or yourself, or myself, whatever, when you're fresh out of college, the amount of money you need is probably smaller. You may not have a house. You might be renting. You don't have kids. Your bills are smaller. As you go through life, everything morphs and changes. So what you need is constantly shifting. Mm-hmm. So I will tell my clients that we need to measure your money against the job it needs to do. If we don't understand the job, how do you know if you have enough? Mm-hmm. Right?
So is that a question, figuring out how much is enough? Is that something that's made when you're in a couple years away from retirement and as you're switching that mindset, or is it something you should start thinking about way before that?
Very good question. I believe it's something you should be thinking way before that, because if you're not thinking about how much might I need when I retire, when you're in your 30s or 40s, how do you know if you're saving enough? Mm-hmm. Because people tend to get fixated on investments. Is the market up? Is the market down? What did the market do today? What about cryptocurrency? All that stuff. But they don't fixate on, hey, how much do I need to save every month? Do I need to save $50 or do I need to save $5,000? They just fixate on investments many times, not all the time, but many times. And so you need to start that early.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would think that the hesitancy to spend and being afraid to spend and the difficulty in switching mindsets starts with, do I have enough? Because if they're not sure they have enough, they're never really going to successfully switch that mindset because they're constantly going to be afraid of having enough and maybe I shouldn't spend as much in retirement and set some aside. So perhaps precursor um, to that shift in mindset of giving yourself permission to spend is to determine whether you have enough, right?
Yes. And I feel there's two things: determining how much money do I need?
Mm-hmm.
How much does that money need to kick off to me monthly, annually, whatever, so I can pay my bills and live the way I want to live in retirement?
Mm-hmm.
But one of the very common things that I encounter with most clients as they go to retire, they'll eventually come and sit down and go, my last check is coming in, I don't know, make it up, next month, in 3 months. What do I do now? Like that money's not going in my checking. What do I do now? And the whole recreating the paycheck from all of the assets and the monies that they've accumulated becomes a big deal because they've never had to do that before.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a shift in looking at your investment philosophy. And I will always tell my clients what got you here
Mm-hmm.
and what got you to retirement will not get you through retirement.
Mm-hmm.
It shifts. If you've had a wildly aggressive portfolio your entire life, you got to start to shift and make it more appropriate for the next stage in life. And that's a whole nother topic. But that retirement triggers many changes for people, and they get very nervous unless they have somebody like me or another professional to rely upon helping give them guidance and advice.
Mm-hmm. And really planning out what
Mm-hmm.
you want to do in retirement.
Okay.
And there are all sorts of pieces to this, and speaking to other guests, I mean, do you live in a state that has a very high cost of living?
Mm-hmm.
Are you comfortable with moving to a state that has a much lower cost of living? So they say, okay, well, if I live in New Jersey, which ain't the best place to retire to, but there are a lot more retirement-friendly states in the union, and people can certainly Google that and find out and say, well, are you comfortable doing that?
Absolutely.
Do you have maybe as your kids are grown and you're still a few years away from retirement, maybe the kids live in a more retirement-friendly state and they can move to that state.
There are many things to consider. And you're right. Thinking about, am I in an income tax friendly state? I'm in Florida. We don't have a state income tax. So you wonder why all the retirees flock here. But we have wildly expensive homeowners insurance. We have hurricanes that we have to protect them. So, you just offset the risks and the costs. But there's other things you have to look at. I have people that have retired that want to move near their children, or they want to move somewhere different. They want to move to a retirement community or retirement area. I have a lot of clients who are single. Some of them have children, a lot of them don't have children. And that becomes a different conversation of how do you age as a solo retiree? How are you building your support systems? How are you, so there's all this stuff that's not money that comes into the conversation. And then the money has to back up, the other stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And you have to look at that and say, and in another episode, we talked about this in relocating, especially for the single person you pointed out, can be very isolating. You're leaving a state. Even if you may not have family, you have a network of friends that you socialize with and things like that, and you're leaving that, and you're starting all over again.
with
So,
new doctors, new looking for new friends, all
mhm,
of that type of stuff. Think about this also. If you decide to stay where you are, and I have so many people that I've worked with over the 30 years that have wanted to stay in their home, relocating when you're 65 or 70 is probably a lot easier than relocating when you're 84. So thinking through your vision of retirement, what do you want it to look like in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years? Because at some point we'll all be hopefully 84, right?
mhm,
Things are harder at that point. So you need to think through, what do you want it to look like as you move forward, and what will it take to fund that? And
mhm,
then you back up your investments to match that.
exactly. And what do you want to do in retirement?
Mm-hmm.
That,
Mm-hmm.
do you want to travel? Well, if you want to travel, then you're going to need more money than if you just want to stay at home. My wife and I want to travel in
Absolutely.
retirement, and we're planning for those additional expenses. It's going to cost money to, go around the world and see things beyond the United States. If you have any, expensive hobbies or
Mm-hmm.
that you're into, are you an amateur pilot, or there are all sorts of things that are, golfing can get expensive, depending upon where you are and where you play and things like that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, you look at the cost of living and say, okay, and if you're staying where you are, you have a pretty good idea of cost of living. This is, what my wife and I are now. She just retired at the beginning of this year, and we're looking at, okay, this is her retirement income. I'm continuing to work, and what's our budget in retirement? What do we need to change? What do we need to adjust? What do we still need? What do we not need anymore?
One of the big things that, obviously this is on most people's minds, but one of the big things that people have to think about and consider, and is the wild card, healthcare.
Yes.
What is healthcare going to cost you as a retiree? And also long-term care. What happens if you get to a point in life where you can't do everything on your own and you just need help? You need somebody to come in the house, you need to, move to a different community. That's going to cost money. How are you going to pay for that?
Hmm.
That's a big thing. And so clients come to me with all these questions and all these concerns. And because you have all these questions and concerns, that boils back down to, do I have enough? I don't know. And the reason people get concerned about how to figure out, do they have enough, is they don't know how to do the math.
Hmm.
They don't know how to adequately project forward or do the math, which is where my planning software comes in, that I
Hmm.
use in my work with clients, where we could sit in detail, look at the math, and kind of do projections with all the taxes and expenses and everything else, to help give some semblance of reassurance to a person, or help them make adjustments if
Hmm.
maybe they don't have enough.
Hmm. And one
You
thing to
know?
bear in mind too, and kind of the good news in a way, as far as what enough is,
Mhm.
what you have in assets, whatever you, however diversified your portfolio is, or the level of liquidity of different assets, uh, is not going to be the number. You don't start with that number and go down and say,
Mhm.
all right, I have this amount of money, and this amount of money has to last me, say, another 20 years, depending upon what, your family history and how long lived you are and everything else. Because depending upon where you have your money, that money continues to grow.
Mhm.
You're drawing down, say, you've got um, your 401k, and now you have to make required minimum distributions. As you pull that money out, the balance is still invested and is still growing.
And those are all the assumptions and things that I include in the projections, because you're right, that money's still growing. But on the flip side, that money's still growing. If somebody gives me an idea of what they're going to spend in retirement, I guarantee you they will spend more,
Mm-hmm.
because there's always those things that you can't plan for.
Mm-hmm.
My car broke down, whatever. I need to replace my car a lot sooner than I expected, or I had some sort of health issue, or we took a special trip because the opportunity came up. People will always spend more.
And
What's
isn't that true
challenging?
of 20-year-olds as much as 65, 70-year-olds in that you need a budget, you need an emergency fund, that really these mindsets, and that raises a good point to consider. What we're talking about is, the topic of this episode in our interview is how do you build that paycheck? You're no longer getting this paycheck. This is your take home pay from your job and your spouse's job, whatever it is, and that. This great unknown is, what is your paycheck going to be going forward? But to a great extent, a lot of other things are just what you've been doing the last 40 years. Budgeting, keeping track of expenses, savings for unexpected expenses, things like that. And that doesn't, what you're spending it on may change. You mentioned healthcare and things like that, but it's still, I would think, the same mindset of keeping track of what you're spending and budgeting, right?
Yes, if you do that. Many people do that and are very good at it. Many people don't do that and aren't as good at it. And if you take couples, sometimes with couples, there's one person that's in charge of it and the other person's just like la 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 la. They don't know why, because they know the other one's taking care of it.
Right.
So they don't necessarily have a complete understanding of the budget and what they're spending, because it's not their responsibility in the household. It's the other person is taking charge of it.
Right.
And I've seen that sometimes where then somebody might overspend in retirement a bit just because they weren't the one doing that. So their mindset isn't like that. They just spend, and it's a whole adjustment period for them. But one of the things I do, I wrote a book last year called Fearless Finance. By the way, just an FYI, there's a story behind Impavid Wealth Advisors, my franchise name. Impavid is a little known word in the English language meaning fearless, hence fearless finance.
Okay.
But I wrote in the book about recreating the paycheck and how to structure for retirement. And it goes hand in hand in determining how much you need a month, what your income sources are, how much money you need saved up, and how much money that needs to kick off to you in income, and then structuring your assets so you have enough in very short-term assets to cover 36-ish months of distributions, and then have another pile that covers like years 3 to 7 that are medium risk, and then have growth-oriented stuff. So that way, in the short run, if we have a shift in the market or some volatility, it doesn't matter because you've covered 36 months of what you need. So you don't have to freak out or get really stressed if we hit a bumpy patch in the markets.
Mm-hmm.
And then you replenish back. Because sometimes when people come to me, they either do one of two things. They think everything has to immediately go conservative. I'm like, but you might live 30 years and you need growth. Or they don't think they need to shift money. And I'm like, but you need to cover the short run. So there's a definite strategy of how to structure your assets, but it relies on that figure of how much money you need a month.
Mm-hmm. And that's true. And that you need to look to, and I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, is a rebalancing of this portfolio, where as you were saving and you essentially didn't need that money right away because you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s and you're not retiring until 65, 67, then you can absorb that risk or the volatility in the market because you don't need the money right now. And being
Absolutely.
aware that just because the market is down doesn't mean you lost money because you haven't sold anything, and you just ride it out. But as you approach retirement, you need to restructure that portfolio away from just maybe aggressive growth and have whatever that percentage or split or whatever size of each slice of the pizza. But you need something income producing. That's your paycheck. You need something in cash for your unexpected expenses or cash flow crimps where you need a lot of money now and then later you'll be able to make it up. And you need something still in growth in equities as a hedge against inflation, so that as things become more expensive and inflation hits you, you can transfer some of that money from growth over to your income producing slice of the pie to help absorb that, right? So what we're
You
really
are
talking about is
correct.
rebalancing.
You're correct. And going into that transition of retirement, that's where, in my opinion, of course, it'd be my opinion because I am the professional, but it would be good to sit down with a professional that will help guide you through the specifics that you should do for your investments and your portfolio, because everybody's structured differently in terms of, what do they have in um, IRA money? What is taxable money? How is it structured? What is their tax bracket? What state do they live in? What is the tax structure? How much do they need a month? So where should the money be coming from? And
Mm-hmm.
so where do you make the shifts and how do you make the shifts?
Right.
And so it's called a bucket strategy. And so the whole bucket strategy sounds very simplistic. And on the surface it is, but it's bigger than that because everyone has different piles of assets and you have to figure out where to do it and how to do it and what things to sell, what things to hold, what to incorporate. And that does become stressful for somebody because they're used to just accumulating, saving, saving, savings. And now we're structuring it to spend.
Right. Exactly.
Mhm.
And it's very different from that paycheck, that regular
Mhm.
source of income. So
Absolutely.
so that leads into the next question and more to the topic of this episode. Let's talk about putting together that paycheck. What are the building blocks of that paycheck that people need to look at in structuring this and piecing together the paycheck?
Pretty much what I just said. You need to look at your income sources. Do you have a pension? What's your social security? Do you have guaranteed sources of money?
Mm-hmm.
How much do you need a month? Let's just make up numbers.
Right.
Say you need $5,000 a month and you've got 2,000 coming in from pension social security. So you need 3 grand.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look at your investments. And if you need 3,000 a month, you need to set aside 36 months worth of that in cash or cash equivalents, as you said, to cover all, if the market is volatile, you don't have to worry.
Mm-hmm.
And then have 3 to 4 years worth of that in conservative stuff, and then have the other stuff in growth.
Mm-hmm.
And structuring that between your tax deferred investments and taxable accounts, you need to structure that. How do I say this simplistically without going down a rabbit hole? Just structure in a way to control your tax bracket. And that's where the professional can help you.
Mm-hmm.
Because
And you
somebody
mentioned
their eyes can get crossed if they go too deep in this, and then they'll confuse themselves
right.
sometimes because
So
it's a
you talked
lot.
about these regular streams of income and how far that gets you, and determining what your monthly nut is, and that's important. You know
Yes.
that component on the expense side as opposed to the income side,
Mhm.
and that's something my wife and I've been doing for quite a while, and looking at our spending and saying, okay, while we're working pre-retirement, how much does it cost us to live? And can we pare that down in retirement? Are there things we won't need anymore? We're not going to work anymore, so we're not going to spend as much on gas, on maintenance of the vehicle, things like that. And then all right, this is how much we need. And then you look at the components. You have Social Security. You mentioned pension. My wife is a retired federal worker. She has a pension, but a lot of people these days, and in this world we live in now,
They don't have
it's
it.
unusual to have a pension.
Yep. Yep.
So then instead of a pension, what I guess the question is, and what your thoughts are on annuities. I mean, not necessarily throw all your money into an annuity, but you can, as you approach retirement, and perhaps one of the Lego pieces or building blocks of your paycheck is saying and talking to a professional like you and saying, all right, how much do you of this pool of money that I have do you suggest I put into an annuity to create sort of that create my own pension as far as cash flow, not as the be all and end all, but as one of the pieces of the paycheck.
So annuities, what I will say about annuities, there are so many people that are like, annuities. I've heard bad things about it. Like, don't
Yes,
do annuities, like bad, bad, bad. And well, there's a reason for that. But annuities are not necessarily bad
right.
if you use them for the right reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you incorporate an annuity in your portfolio, whether it's one that's designed to give you guaranteed retirement income, one that's designed to kind of smell like a Social Security and kind of convert it to a cash flow, and you don't have the balance anymore. You have to understand what it will give you, what are the risks associated with it. If you're putting money into an annuity, you need to understand the costs. And I would tell somebody, if you're going to use an annuity, get your annuity from somebody who is a true financial advisor, not somebody who just sells annuities. Because doesn't mean somebody that just sells annuities is bad. They're just looking in this little box of what they look at, where the financial advisor is looking at the big picture of why are you doing it? What is it going to provide for you? Is the cost of it appropriate for you? What are the risks and what are the benefits? Mm-hmm. Somebody who only does annuities is literally looking at just one spot. They don't know the big picture.
Exactly.
And so you might be making a mistake and you don't know that because they don't know the big picture. Mm-hmm. So just be careful with them. But I've used annuities a lot that give guaranteed retirement income because when the market gets crazy, you know that it doesn't matter because you're always going to get that money in. And annuities are good for a purpose and a place, but they're not good for like an end all be all and just let's throw all your money in annuities. That is like a no.
Right. No, you shouldn't do that. No. And they can be expensive because the commissions and loads that associated with annuities, they're selling you something. That's how they make a living. They make a commission. So you're giving them a piece of that money in return.
Correct. And I will make a note. I will make a note here. I'll give you the generic version of this. People tend to like index annuities because I can't lose money. And they're just sold to you like you can't lose money. You need to look deeper. Mm-hmm. There's more to it than that. And so if you're working with somebody that just says you can't lose money, it's just tied to the index, there's still fees, there's still costs, and you can lose money, but it's not because of the market, it's because of the cost of annuity. So you have to have full disclosure and really understand what you're getting into. They can be great, they can be not great. It's got to match what you need. So that's what I'll say about annuities. I use them all the time, but it's got to fit. It's got to be a puzzle piece.
Exactly. And as long as you use them strategically and intelligently, looking at the big picture, and also understanding that there's more than one kind of annuity. Yes. Where there's some annuities saying you will get this amount of money per month, and that's it. There are variable annuities where the rate of return will go up and down, and there's a downside as well as an upside to that. So perhaps, do you?
So
when you look, I guess the question is for me with annuities, do you prefer to say, all right, recommend an annuity that say this is the amount of money you're going to receive from now into the future, and use other parts of the portfolio as your hedge against inflation, or have some sort of, or look at the kind of annuity that might go up with inflation as its own hedge? Which of the two do you think is better, or is it a mix of the two?
It's kind of a mix because every situation is different. Uh-huh. If somebody has accumulated enough money where they're never going to spend it in their lifetime, maybe they don't need an annuity.
Right.
If somebody were kind of sort of on the fence, maybe to have that security of the income, we should have a portion in annuity. Just if you use annuities in your situation, because there are good annuities out there, they change over the years and kind of go up and down in terms of what's available, but work with a financial advisor who is a fiduciary because they have to do what's in your best interest. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to just come and sell you something where they made a big commission and then walk away and never talk to you again. Mm-hmm. We can't do that. We have to do what's in your best interest, and if annuity is in your best interest, great. If it's not, then you shouldn't do it. But everything's different. So there's literally no one size fits all. Mm-hmm. I've had people where I'm like, it's not right for you. And other people, it does work. It's just the mathematical question of like, how do the puzzle pieces put together?
Another thing that my wife and I have looked at as a possibility. Now, I don't know that we'd necessarily end up having to do it, but you and I know something called a DRIP, which is an acronym for a dividend reinvestment program, where your investments are not only overly appreciating in value, and the buying and selling within the fund can cause and drive the growth, but those stocks, those investments, are kicking off dividends,
Mhm.
which the broker then uses to buy more stock, and you get growth from that.
And
Do you turn off the drip?
yes, I was just going to say that because in the accumulation phase, you could have it all reinvesting and building more shares for you if you need more shares, if it fits your asset allocation, right?
Right.
Then when you get transitioned into retirement, you change the drip so it doesn't drip back into your investment. It drips on you because that's your paycheck.
Right. And it could be a simpler way to rebalance. In other words, let's say you have several growth funds and they all have drips. Well, you don't have to turn it all off. You can say, okay, well, and just look at your 1099s and your statements over the years. What's the average amount of dividend that is
Mhm.
kicked off, and the fund, whether it's Vanguard or Schwab or whatever else it is, and their statements will tell you this is how much was earned in dividends and how much was reinvested, whether it's tax sheltered or not. And you can look at that and say, well, this is the average amount of dividend income, and maybe in this fund I turn off the drip, get that income, but have the drip in the other funds to help for growth and a hedge against inflation.
And you can evaluate if each holding in your portfolio is still appropriate for you to hold in the long term. And if it
Mm-hmm.
is, you can turn on those dividends to be paid in cash in that bucket that's holding the 36 months of money,
Mm-hmm.
and you're automatically rebalancing that on a
Right.
regular basis. So it's going to take you longer before you have to replenish it. And so you can look at how much dividends is kicked off by your portfolio
Mm-hmm.
and know that that will come in automatically if you continue to hold those investments. And I say if because sometimes you have to rebalance and something's not appropriate for you to have anymore and you should move into something else. But you monitor those things as you go along. And that's where the professional really is key and they earn their weight. In what they do for you, because all those fine-tuned things the financial professional should be looking at and guiding.
Right. And it could
Mhm.
depend on where that money is invested. Not everything. I mean, if it's in an IRA, you can rebalance it within the IRA to more towards income investments rather than growth investments. But if you're outside the tax umbrella, selling and you're selling some shares and buying others that are more income producing, that can create a significant tax liability when you do that.
It
Right.
could.
So, yeah.
It could. It could. So that's where you have to look at the puzzle
Mm-hmm.
and go, what puzzle pieces do I have and what do they look like and what should I do?
Mm-hmm.
Because those same investments that you sell and reposition, what if they generate a capital loss? That could
Mm-hmm.
happen too. Then maybe you should. So it's truly you have to kind of take an inventory of what you have and what are the best steps for you.
Mm-hmm.
And they're always everyone's different. I always say that it sounds like I'm not answering a question, but everybody really is different.
Well, I think it's important for the listeners to understand, and I think that's good that you're doing that. And folks out there, it may be frustrating when we say, well, it depends, because it really does. I mean, the idea here is to give you the ideas and information that you need to educate you so that you can go to a financial professional, like a certified financial planner, and then say, what about this? What about that? And now you know better what you need to talk about and how to shape your paycheck.
Mhm.
But for example, my wife and I have some investments that are outside a retirement umbrella, and we get a tax bill for all those reinvested dividends.
Mhm.
Well, if I said to my wife, I'm sick and tired of paying taxes on money I don't actually put in my pocket. You know, it's terrible. But if you turn off the drip and you get that drip, you're not
Part of your retirement income.
right. You're taking your existing retirement income and paying the taxes on those reinvested dividends instead
Mhm.
of turning off the drip,
Mhm.
and then using some of that drip money to pay the taxes. You can always take that money and the net of taxes from the dividends and invest it in something else, but you're not eating into your other income by having to pay the taxes on those non-exempt dividends.
I hope, if anything, I hope that this conversation helps your listeners and viewers to understand this is not an easy topic. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I have people walk through my doors that are very successful, very high net worth people, have saved a lot of money, and they feel silly to ask certain questions because they feel like they should know the answer because they're successful and they've saved a lot. This is a very complex topic.
Mm-hmm.
And with all this stuff in the media that's thrown at us and rules of thumb and general thoughts and whatever, it doesn't matter because everyone's different and it is complex. And that's where most people could use the assistance of a professional because it's a very complex topic.
Mm-hmm.
And people think it's supposed to be easy and there should be no big deal. There's so many nuances and ins and outs and things to consider. And you're different than your neighbor. You're different than your coworker. You know, it's people think it's supposed to be easy and it's not.
But at the same time, I think that this knowledge is very empowering when you're
Uh-huh.
trying to shift that mindset from saving to spending to know, okay, wait a minute, this isn't as scary as you might
Mm-hmm.
have thought it was. You might
Correct.
think there are people who think it's easy, but to a lot of other people, it's scary. They don't understand what happens when you retire and what you need to do, and that there are things that you can do that can make sure you're ensure as best you can that you're
Mm-hmm.
comfortable in retirement. That there are ways to do it.
Yeah, one of my big thing is for people if it's scary to them or they're unsure, find a trusted person. Ask your friends, ask your
Mm-hmm.
neighbors, ask the people you trust.
Mm-hmm.
Who do they use? Who would they trust? And get the help because the person, it's like me trying to do my own tax return. Why would I do that? It's very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It's not overwhelming, but I don't know the ins and outs. I want somebody else to be able to guide me, and I want them to give me peace of mind that I'm doing the right things, and I want them to educate me on what I should or shouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was just my point. I'm blonde. My brain went. One of
Uh,
the things I did do last year was I did write a book. It's called Fearless Finance. I'm not selling it. I'm giving it to people. I do mention my firm, so I can't sell it anyway. I never wanted to sell it. But I have realized that I can't personally work with every single person out there. There's a time and capacity issue. And
mhm.
I wrote a book to give general topics that everybody can go back and revisit, whether they've got $1 million, whether they've got $10 million. They can go back and revisit, and it makes them think about stuff for their situation. And so somebody can email me and I'll mail them a book and have at it. But it was sort of my give back to the universe, karma.
Well, it also saves you time. I mean, I would think that if someone comes to you and said, "I
Mm-hmm.
need your help," and they've already read your book, they
Yes.
come to you pre-educated on a lot of the stuff, which can save you some time and say, "Okay, you've read the book. Here's how
Mm-hmm.
we're going to implement it for you." And that saves
Yeah.
you time, then time. They come to you more comfortable with the process.
It also helps them to develop some questions like, oh, now that I've read it, I have questions about my situation. I made a list of like, what about this? What about that? And it's got
Mhm.
them thinking.
Right, exactly.
So the whole topic of this is a complicated situation isn't meant to necessarily scare people. It's just meant as it's okay to ask for help and you'll be in a better position to ask for help
Hmm.
and to get assistance because things are constantly, tax laws constantly change, the market changes, products change, everything changes in life.
Hmm. So we've talked about the components of this paycheck, your paycheck for retirement, whether it be turning off the drip, investing some of your funds in an annuity, rebalancing your portfolio to create a stream of income, things like that. But I would think that people also should be warned that just because you put together this paycheck now doesn't mean that that's going to carry you all the way through retirement. This is not set it or forget it. So you may need to go back and revisit and reform that paycheck to address more your current situation, not your situation at the time you actually retired, right?
Absolutely. Why? Life happens. You
Yep.
have plans, and those plans might change.
Mm-hmm.
What if your adult children boomerang?
Yeah.
It happens.
Yep.
What if your parents need help? It happens. What if your spouse dies unexpectedly? Sadly, that happens. We don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
Things happen.
Mm-hmm.
What if somebody springs something on you and you're like, wow, I want to go on that trip. That's a trip of a lifetime. I'm going to spend an extra whatever, fill in the blank. Life happens. So you have to go back and monitor and revisit. It definitely is not a set it and forget it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So you've talked about your book and what you do now. Your company is, as I understand it, a franchisee of
Ameriprise
Ameriprise
Financial.
Financial.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about your company name, but you are Ameriprise Financial.
I am
Right?
Ameriprise Financial. I'm an independent franchise of Ameriprise.
Okay.
Um,
Because
hence the
that does have
Impavid
brand
logo.
recognition, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of folks have heard of Ameriprise. I have, and
Mm-hmm.
know that they have a reputation in they're recognizable in the industry. You mentioned your book.
If
Uh,
you look up the, I think it's the Time magazine that's coming out this week, perhaps.
okay.
It's got most iconic companies. Buy the magazine, you'll see who's in there. Not me personally, but yes,
Yeah,
Ameriprise is on the list of most iconic companies.
I'm sure. Are there any besides your book? Do you have any other resources to tell the folks about a website, a particular offer you have, or uh, ways to reach out to you?
There are a lot of articles and calculators on my website. If you
Mhm.
just search Impavid Wealth Advisors, and
Mhm.
Impavid is spelled Impavid. If you
Mhm.
just search Impavid Wealth Advisors, the website will pop up, and there's a lot of articles, a lot of tools on there. You can request a consultation with me. That just triggers an email to me, and we'll reach out. If you have questions, if you want a copy of the book, just let me know. I'll mail a copy of the book
Mhm.
to you. And that's the best way to reach us. If you want to shoot an email, the email is literally Impavid Wealth Advisors at ampf.com, Ameriprise Financial.
Okay.
Shoot me an email and I'll send you a book.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Laura. I'm sure that hopefully we've gotten people to breathe a little easier. That big time when they're going to retire and changing that mindset that chances are things will be okay.
Yeah.
Ask themselves these questions, look at these issues, and then talk to a professional.
Mm-hmm.
Don't. This is not a do-it-yourself project, folks. This is
It's
not
not.
DIY. You're not building a spice rack, okay?
The
You
goal
need
is to
to
have retirement once. We don't want to go back to work.
exactly. So reach out to a professional with these questions and these ideas, and
Mm-hmm.
build your own paycheck for retirement.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thanks for coming on the show, Laura.
Thanks for having me.